Can you hear me?
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? If you could please take your seats.
Hi, good evening, and welcome to the Shenandoah Candidate Forum. My name is Nicole Preston. I'm the General Manager of Community Impact Newspaper for the Woodlands, Oak Ridge, and Shenandoah. I'm joined by my reporter, Andrew Chrisman. He will be asking the questions of the candidates. Most of the rules we currently have up on the board, I'll just recap. Each candidate will be given a 2-minute opening and closing. After the 2 minutes, we'll ask a question of the candidates, and the other candidate will have a 1-minute rebuttal. We will have timekeepers in the room, so please, candidates, abide by our time. That really helps us to get through the forum on time. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Andrew Chrisman. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with our opening statements. Mr. Escado, you're up.
How much time do you have? I'm sorry.
You have 2 minutes.
2 minutes, all right. Hi, all. First of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for participating in this what I feel is a very important forum where you get to ask questions of both of us to make your informed decisions on May 7th. My name is John Escado, and I'm presently a council member here in Shenandoah. Before that, I was in the Planning and Zoning Commission. I've been a resident of Shenandoah for going on a little over 11 years now. And how I wound up in Shenandoah is a simple story. After wandering the world with Homeland Security as a supervisory special agent and criminal investigator, my wife, who's sitting right here in front of me, Eileen, her parents evacuated from Katrina back in 2005 and wound up here in the Woodlands. And they stayed with my sister-in-law, who was also here, and her husband. As my wife and I, Eileen and I, approached our retirement age, we were looking for a place to live. So we came down here to visit the Woodlands area, and immediately on arriving in Shenandoah looking for a home, we fell in love with it and said, this is a place where we want to live. And so we signed a contract, built a house here in Shenandoah, and went back to DC and completed our full retirement. That's how we wound up here in Shenandoah. A little bit of my background. Like I said, I'm a retired federal agent. I have a total of 32 years of law enforcement experience, most of it in the federal government, but I have military, local, and state law enforcement experience with executive management involved.
Thank you. Ms. Lum?
Yes, hi, I'm Esther Lum, and I have practiced law for 25 years. I negotiated contracts, I settled cases, and tried cases. For the last 6 years of my career, I was the Director of Compliance for an international service company. I retired in 2014, and then I moved to Shenandoah the following year. I never thought I would run for office. I prefer life as a private citizen, and I had zero interest in ever being a public figure. But everything changed for me in 2021. And a year ago, right here in this room, during the city election cycle, Mayor Wheeler said this: Shenandoah doesn't have any problems. People like to create problems, then run for office so they can solve the problems. That was one of the most disrespectful things I have ever heard from an elected public official. And it was also an insult to the very idea of democracy. Here's why I'm running. You see this coin? There's two sides to it. There's a side, this is our money, and there's a side we give to City Hall, and they tax on one side. The other side of the coin is spending. And in the last 7 months, I have observed reckless spending and tax increases coming from this council. My opponent, Mr. Escado, voted to essentially raise property taxes. He voted to raise city staff salaries outside of the normal budget process. Why? Well, he'll give you his reasons tonight. But my question is this: could this taxing and spending be related to the enormous debt that our city has? In 2019, our city debt was about $11,000 a person. It's much higher than the 9 other cities our size that the Texas Comptroller's Office compared us to. And I'm going to post this link on my Facebook page tomorrow so you can all see it for yourselves. We need a mayor who's committed to cutting taxes, cutting spending, and reducing debt. And that person is me.
Thank you. Okay, so Mr. Escado, we'll start with you with the first question. What qualifications do you have that will be helpful as a mayor? You have 2 minutes.
Well, I have been on the city council. I know what the ins and outs, the needs of the city. I know what the projects are that are upcoming. I have worked on this budget. I know what the expenditures are and what it is that we need to focus on. That experience helps, as well as the planning and zoning experience that I have. I know what the zoning requirements are. I know I'm more informed in those aspects of the city than I believe my opponent is. I also have senior executive experience in the federal government. I have been in charge of 56 international offices throughout the world. I know how to deal with people within those offices. I know how to deal with people outside of those offices in host countries. I have dealt with high-level officials in all of these foreign countries. I believe that I have the executive experience necessary to be in charge and represent the city and to carry the baton that our present mayor, who is not running for office again, has been carrying, and to bring the city to where we are now. I disagree wholeheartedly with everything my opponent has just said. I think our city is in great shape.
Thank you. Ms. Lum. Ms. Lum?
Yes, I was waiting for the applause to end. Shenandoah, this is the line we're getting from City Council, is there are no problems. And I just read to you the debt statistics. These are not, I'm not giving opinions here. I'm dealing with data. This is hard data. Our debt is skyrocketing in this city, and our income, there's no reason for this. We are blessed to be in a corridor where we've got all this business, we've got all this income, and Shenandoah should be in a much healthier financial state than we are. You talk about, the question was really about your experiences and how they qualify you. And as a lawyer for 25 years, I've settled cases, I've tried cases, I've negotiated contracts, and you have people on one side always and somebody else with a completely different position. And I have learned those skills of how to bring those two opposing sides into some kind of agreement. And that's a valuable skill. And he's right, I don't have the same experience he has as far as planning and zoning, but I've been to these meetings. All last year, I was either here or I watched it online. I've spent hours researching case law, advising this council that there are certain things they're not allowed to do during council inquiry. And they had been doing this for a long time. I spent hours researching this. And so just because I don't have the experience doesn't mean I'm disqualified in any way. I think my legal background gives me great qualifications to make sure that this city and this council stays in line with the law.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lum. I just want to ensure that we're timekeeping correctly. So the first question was asked with a 2-minute response, and then it was supposed to be a 1-minute rebuttal, but I think it was 2 minutes. So since there was 2 minutes for each question, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next question. But it is 2 minutes to answer and a 1-minute rebuttal. So we'll go ahead and start with you, Ms. Lum. What do you see as budget priorities now and in future years?
Well, yes, the budget priority right now is we've got to make some cuts. We've got a lot of consultants on the payroll here. I don't even know how many. And one of my questions is going to be, how many do we have? Do we really need all of these consultants? There's probably a lot of other areas that we can cut if we take a good, hard look at things. We need to do this because, again, our debt is so high. We've got a good income stream, but we need to tackle that problem. It's a big problem for our city. There is no way we should have the kind of debt that we have. When you see the chart tomorrow, when I post it on my website, and you can go right to it, you'll see Shenandoah is like this, and all these other cities that are about our population, they're way down here on the bar. It is absolutely mind-blowing. So it's going to be a priority. And we also need to look at what projects we have coming up. We need to look at the long-term impact. We've got runaway inflation right now. So a lot of our assumptions that we had in previous budget planning, they're not valid anymore. So we've got to take a look at that very realistically and recognizing there's a lot of uncertainty right now.
Thank you. Mr. Escado, your 1-minute rebuttal.
Yes, in addressing the debt, presently the city general fund is responsible for, actually, the general fund is responsible for about $13.7 million. These are bonds that were taken out during 2013, 2015, and 2019. And they were taken out to make improvements to the city. Some of our former city, there's a former mayor here, and there's a couple of former, I'm glad you're enjoying this, just like you enjoyed your meeting with the person who is suing the city. I take a lot of umbrage in the fact, don't throw me off.
You did.
Yeah. So, the bonds that were taken out to improve the city are still outstanding.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Escado, your 2-minute question. What do you see as budget priorities now and in future years?
Our budget priorities now are to maintain our maintenance and to keep the city running. That is the bulk of our priorities. We have the benefit that we get sales tax revenue, which make up about 70% of our revenue, with about 30% in property tax. Out of those 30% in property tax, 70% of that 30% comes from commercial property tax, and the rest comes from residential tax. Utilizing that money to ensure our city's future, to pay our bills, to keep the city running, is my main concern and my main goal, to maintain those revenues the way they are.
Thank you. Ms. Lum, your
Yeah.
1-minute rebuttal.
Okay, yeah, the contrast couldn't be clearer here. We got somebody talking about more spending, maintaining, and I'm talking about cutting. My priority is going to be, like I said, to actively look for ways we can cut spending. We need to we need to really, why do we have all these consultants? I don't understand it. You come to city council meetings and you'll have this consultant saying this. And recently we had the consultants telling us that we needed to hire somebody for CVB. I mean, what's up with that? why don't the employees, why aren't they able to justify the hiring of another position? I mean, do we need a consultant to do these things? I think that there's some things there that we can cut, and when it's going to take a closer look. It's going to take somebody willing to say, why are we doing this?
Thank you.
Mr. Escado, our third question for the evening. How do you feel Shenandoah can best utilize its extraterritorial jurisdiction?
Our ETJ, well, we have outgrown or almost outgrown our city limits. Our ETJs are very important for us to start developing. We're in the process of spending some money to extend water and sewage eastbound on Tamina Road with the intent to develop that land in the eventuality that we wind up incorporating all of that area, all the way up to the railroad tracks. This will attract more commercial developers because that's what that is zoned for. And the more developers that get interested and decide to invest in those areas because of the utilities that we're willing to extend, that are going to extend out that way, the more revenue that we'll get for the city, for the benefit of the city and the residents.
Thank you. Ms. Lum, your 1 minute rebuttal.
Yeah, I think that the ETJ, I think there has to be a vote for these people to come into the ETJ. It's not just that we can just take that area over. And speaking of this ETJ, this council recently approved federal money, ARPA, which I objected to on the basis of principle, but they're spending $800,000 of federal money outside in this ETJ area. It's not even being spent in the city of Shenandoah. So like I said, I objected to that one a couple of times. Another reason I objected to the ARPA money was because it came with strings attached. It clearly says you are subject to federal executive orders and on and on. And we had our city attorney sitting there. Somebody asked him a question, said, "Are there strings attached?" And he said, "No." That is absolutely not true. I challenge any of you, go look it up. It says ARPA money, you are subject to federal regulation. And that's something I don't want for our city.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Lum, how do you feel that Shenandoah can best utilize its extraterritorial?
That was for you.
Well, Ms. Lum, how do you feel that Shenandoah can best? Okay, better?
Yeah.
Hey, there we go. Okay, so Ms. Lum, how do you feel that Shenandoah can best utilize its extraterritorial jurisdiction? You have 2 minutes.
Well, we don't have a lot. I mean, there is extraterritorial jurisdiction, but people have to vote to be added in. I don't see anybody coming to us and saying, we want to be part of Shenandoah. And I mean, especially with the debt rate that we've got, $11,000, and that was 2019 data. That is not even updated for where we are today. You'll see it. I see people shaking their heads. Do that all you want, but when I put the data up there, you'll see it. So I'm tired of all the happy talk. Oh, this is such a great place. And don't get me wrong, this is a good city. But don't tell me, like the mayor said a year ago, that we don't have any problems. Because if you have that attitude, you're never going to look for the solutions that this city needs to solve our financial issues. And there are some. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Escado, your 1 minute rebuttal.
Understanding what the debt is and who pays for what is very important in becoming a mayor. The majority of the debt that my opponent is referring to is PID debt. That's public improvement development debts. Take, for instance, Metro Square Park, where Moon is, the Moon Shopping Center is. That debt is being carried, is being paid by Sam Moon, not the city. So the astronomical numbers that my opponent is referring to, keep that in mind, that is a major part of the debt that's listed. The rest of the debt were loans that were taken out for the betterment of the city, for the improvement of the city, for the amenities that are provided to you, the residents of the city.
Thank you.
Can I respond? Can I respond?
You already had your rebuttal on this particular question.
All right.
So we're going to move on to our other question, but Ms. Lum, we'll start with you. What do you see as the greatest challenges facing Shenandoah? 2 minutes.
Well, I'm just going to say, go back to his point before I answer that. What if they default on the debt? Then who's responsible? In the year of COVID, we saw a lot of small businesses go out of, just have to shut their doors. And so I don't necessarily buy this that, well, they're paying for it. They're paying for it as long as they can stay in business, but there's always the possibility of default. Now, as far as the greatest challenges that we have in the city, I would say it's growth. We've got 4 multi-family residential areas that are either going up or they're already operational. Centro is an example. And this has been an intentional effort, apparently, by this council to double our population. So we're going from, 3,000 or 3,500, something like that. In just a few years, we're going to double. So that means a lot more people, that means a lot more demand on the infrastructure, it means potentially more crime, and it means a lot more traffic. And for example, this huge apartment complex right off of Six Pines, there was somebody here in the audience who objected to that. And the council went forward with it. I saw the video. So, that's something else I've seen, is that when citizens come in and say, we don't want certain things, this council just overrides. Many times it's happened. It's happened with our objections to late night hours for mixed beverages. We don't like that. And we've had mixed messages coming from council, but we see the votes coming in anyway. They override what the people are asking for, and that's not representative government. So that's what I want to change.
Thank you. Mr. Escado, your 1-minute rebuttal.
Sure. It's easy to judge when you're sitting outside of chambers or sitting outside of meetings. It's easy to judge decisions, hard decisions that are made not only by council members, but those people who provide input, such as like the planning and zoning. They do a tremendous amount of research when addressing these issues. This is not done in a capricious manner. This is done with thorough research and thorough consideration. This is not a fly-by-night operation that you're watching going on in this city hall. This is a professional, deliberating, decision-making body that you're looking at when you look at City Hall. This is somebody with experience needs to lead the city. I'd like to know where all these cuts, all these budget cuts are going to be made. That's what I want to see.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Escado, what do you see as the greatest challenges facing Shenandoah? You have 2 minutes.
Again, growth, one thing I do agree with my opponent is growth, city growth. Our population is growing. People want to actively move to Shenandoah. I know this for a fact. I know people have told me that. And they told me that they couldn't get here fast enough. Well, with growth comes mobility problems. With growth comes infrastructure maintenance and to provide for that amount of growth. As we can't grow out anymore, we have to grow up. There's no going around it. Growth is here and we have to deal with it. We can't run away from it. There's no more expansion. Again, those decisions are not done in a capricious manner. They're all done very deliberately. They're deliberating. There's a lot of deliberating that's done to do them, to make those decisions. We don't throw money around like former administrations did. We don't pay for trips to Las Vegas. We don't pay for car allowances. We don't pay for technical allowances. We don't pay for councilmen's dinners before council. We don't do that. We don't spend money like that anymore. It was done before, it's not done now. We deliberate. Every August, we sit and we pore over what we need to spend money on for the oncoming year. We trim as much fat as we can, and we also postpone those projects that we know the city needs, but we prioritize them. It's a process that we have. It's easy to stand outside and point fingers, but unless you come into this hall right here when we deliberate about what the next budget is going to be, then you'll understand what the big picture is.
Thank you. Islam, your 1 minute rebuttal.
Yeah, I'm glad he brought this up about throwing money around like previous councils. One thing I've noticed is our city is very divided, and people don't like it. Now, there's not a whole lot I can do about that, but one thing I am going to insist on is that the finger pointing and the blame game really stops. My approach is going to be, it is whatever it is. And if you fix some things and you're proud of it, then good, run on that record. But people don't want to hear this, this administration did this and this one did that. We're tired of it. There's a lot of people that are brand new to the city and they have completely tuned out all of this talk. So it's not helpful in any regard, and I'm not going to perpetuate that. If I am elected, I'm going to say, let's just, whatever it is, that's what it is. So we don't have to say, well, this council did that. Things were different back then.
Thank you.
Folks, let me remind you, there is no discussion from the floor on either side. There's no comments. Please be quiet, listen to the candidates. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Escado, you have 2 minutes to answer the following question. What will your priorities be when taking office as mayor if elected?
My priorities are going to be to keep the city going in a forward direction. We are progressing. We are doing the best that this council and this city can do to keep our city safe, primarily, to meet the residents' needs, which I fully believe that we are meeting. Those are the main priorities, and to represent the city to the rest of the surrounding areas, to the rest of the county, to the rest of the governing bodies that surround us, so that we could have mutual respect for one another, mutual cooperation as we address those issues that involved all of us, like traffic, which is the main thing. Issues like how are we going to react if there's an emergency, a disaster, coordinating all those things. The last 6 years, the city has been fortunate to have that type of relationship with our surrounding neighbors. I want to maintain that relationship. I seek to cooperate with everyone on these matters. My outlook towards this city is a lot more positive than my opponents. I think that we are a great city. We should be proud of our city. Although I may not agree with decisions that are made by some people, by past administrations, and some decisions from this administration that I don't agree with. But I'm very respectful of it, and I know that the decisions that are being made are done for the benefit of the city and the benefit of the residents of the city.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's absolutely not respectful when you have the mayor saying that people shouldn't run for office. They're just creating problems so they can solve them. That is completely disrespectful to the democratic process. Now, as far as what I would do, some of my top priorities is besides the budget, we've talked about that a lot. I want to have roundtables. We've got a crime problem in this city, and it's the catalytic converter theft. It's been in the Impact paper. I've watched the statistics in the blotter every week since October. We've had 2 to 7, pretty much an unbroken streak. And there's some ideas that the Woodlands Township has that they're implementing to ID these things. Some of the business owners I've talked to said, let's have some roundtables. We can talk about, they have ideas that they can work with SPD. And then the other thing is I'm going to set up a town hall for July, and I'm going to set up my office hours. And people, if you don't like it, if you don't like what you see, you can come talk to me.
Thank you. Well, at this time, I think we're going to take a very brief break so we can gather some questions from the audience. We'll probably need 5 or 10 minutes or so. So give us just a...
We'll review those questions.
Yeah.
Anybody got questions? You want the cards? Anybody got questions to turn in?
Okay, I think we're about to get started. If everyone will take their seats. Thank you again, Mr. Escado and Ms. Lum, for being here. It's great to see such a great turnout from the community. What we're going to do is we're going to take audience questions. We're going to ask the same question to each candidate and give 2 minutes, so each of you will have 2 minutes to answer the question. We've picked as many as we can. We got several questions. Thank you, everybody, for giving us these questions. We're going to ask about 6 questions. Candidates, if you want the additionals that your community has of you, or you can have those after the forum. So I'm going to start with Ms. Lum. Specifically, and this will be a question, I guess both of you will start with Ms. Lum answering first, 2 minutes each. Specifically state what you wish to change with regards to city government and then explain why.
Okay, I don't know that I have anything, well, there are a few specific things. Like, one thing that we haven't seen any minutes from the meetings for 2022. I don't understand that. And when we do have agendas that are published, we have just a blurb, city administrator update, city attorney update. We need a little more detail on that. So those are just some, minor points. Hopefully that's not going to be a big change or cause anybody to have a problem in that. As far as coming in and making a lot of changes, I want to do town halls, and I want to do some positive changes. I'm not going to come in here and just, wreck the place. Like some people seem to think that, the world is going to come to an end if I get elected. That's so crazy. It's not realistic, and the changes I want to see are really rooted in financial discipline. We have got to, we have a lot of money. The city is very blessed, and cities our size all across the state, they don't have the same kind of money. So why should we even have any debt? That's a question I think that needs to be asked. And we have been spending and spending for so long. It's not sustainable in the time we're in. We're in some hard times right now. I think everybody recognizes there's so much uncertainty. And all the assumptions of the past, you cannot carry those forward. So I'm interested in some serious belt tightening. A question I have is, why do part-time elected officials get medical insurance at the cost of the city? Why is that? That doesn't seem normal to me. And so we need to look at these different things. And so as far as wide-scale changes, that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Lum. Mr. Escado, I'm going to ask the same question. I'll go ahead and repeat it. Specifically state what you wish to change with regards to city government and then explain why.
I'd like to see more communication being spread out. I do agree with my opponent. I think that the more information that we put out to the public, the better informed that they will be, and the better understanding they will be of how the city is being run. Presently, during this campaign especially, I have heard a lot of misinformation or not full information to allow residents to make informed decisions. I think that if I'm elected, I will make sure that information is disseminated out to the people it affects the most. You the resident, me, of the city. That's the main thing that I'd like to change about the city. To reduce, to bridge that gap that there is between the city hall and some residents of the city. I've noticed that there's a visceral disdain towards members of council, towards members of employees here in City Hall. I'd like to change that. I'd like to change that. The process of governing doesn't have to be this difficult. This is government of the people. And we should be more in touch. There should be more interest from the residents in what's going on in City Hall, not just a handful of people publishing what's bad about the city. which I see a lot of.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Escado, we're going to start you with this next question. While campaigning, what are the 3 most common comments that you've heard by residents?
The most common, I'll tell you, I'm more in a positive way. Most of the people that I have met with have told me that they are happy about the way the things are going in the city. My questions to them when my wife and I knock on doors is there anything that you would like us to do different in the city? And they couldn't think of anything. They did not have any suggestions. They were very happy. My first question to them was, do you feel safe walking up and down the street at day or night? And unanimously answers were yes, I feel completely safe walking down my street at night. That tells me a lot. That tells me that our police department is doing its job. I find it insulting not to mention the good job that the police department is doing at combating crime here in the city. We don't have to resort to business owners to give us guidance on how to enforce the law. Our police department is more than capable of doing that. They have established programs. That's why you see the number of arrests on these blotters that you see every week. There's all the activity all the arrests and all the violations that are being addressed are in this corridor right here next to us. Those people on this side are perfectly safe. They feel perfectly safe. This should be addressed. And I want to address that. I wholeheartedly support our police department for keeping us safe and comfortable at night.
Thank you. Ms. Lum?
Yeah, I support the police too, but a couple weeks ago, we had a triple robbery, aggravated robbery, and one of them was here in the city, and it happened at about 10 o'clock in the morning. So the fact that you recognize crime is on the rise across the nation, thanks to a lot of reasons we're not going to get into, but it's on the rise. That doesn't mean that the police are doing a bad job, so I don't agree with that. Before I get to the 3 concerns, I do want to say that you talk about misinformation and the contempt for council members. Well, I'll tell you how that contempt originates. When you have sitting council members deliberately spreading misinformation, outright lies about a candidate and their qualifications and their background, it's not helpful. It's a sign of a character problem. So I'm not going to waste my time getting into that, but it has happened, and I put out videos about this, and so people can watch those. Now, the concerns I'm hearing about are property tax appraisals. I'm hearing about public safety, these catalytic converter thefts, and traffic and speeding along some of these roads, and the permitting process. Now, we haven't really talked about this, but we have 3 areas in our city where we're subject to dual permitting. I brought this up last fall, and to my knowledge, it still hasn't been resolved, and that's inexcusable. I've also talked to people that are remodeling, and they've had to deal with the city, and some people haven't had any problems, but other people do have problems. And so we need some serious permit reform in this city. What's going to happen here is this is going to be like another West U at some point, where you're going to have a lot of tear downs, and you're going to want to either build new or remodel.
Thank you.
So our second question, Ms. Lum, again, we'll start with you for this question. With mobility being one of the biggest growing issues facing the city, what are the 2 most important projects that need to be completed, and what relationships need to continue or be developed to complete these projects?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because David Memorial going up to 242 is a thorn in everyone's side, and My latest update from the city administrator is that Shenandoah has taken it to its, the furthest they can take it. And so now we're waiting on the county. And also, I think the city of Conroe might have some involvement in this. And so all those county officials, we need to meet with them. We need to, the saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And we have a mayor who has a full-time job. And so he's not able to just drop everything and push these meetings. But being in litigation, having the legal background I have, I understand that sometimes it takes, you're calling somebody, and we're going to get this on the calendar, and you keep calling, and then you get it done. So David Memorial is really key. It's going to alleviate a lot of the feeder traffic on I-45, which is horrible. But also, we have this intersection at Research and 45, which is equally terrible. And we need the county involved in that. I don't think that, and possibly there's federal people that are involved. So there's several relationships. My opponents like to say, well, I don't have these relationships. Well, guess what? When I was practicing law, I met new people all the time, and I formed relationships, and I'm good at talking to people and meeting people, and I don't have an issue with that. I don't think that's going to be a problem that I don't have a prior relationship. Sometimes maybe a new face is even a good thing.
Thank you, Ms. Lum. Mr. Escado, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
With mobility being one of the biggest growing issues facing the city, what are the two most important projects that need to be completed, and what relationships need to continue or be developed to complete them?
Okay, I have to agree that the two projects that my opponent has mentioned are the top priorities. But one thing I need to say to correct what she said is that the assumption that we in council and that the mayor is that we're sitting on our hands and just letting time go by and not doing anything to make these projects move forward is absolutely ridiculous. I, for one, have been engaged in these meetings and negotiations with Judge Keogh, with Commissioner Riley, with Commissioner Nowak, with the Conroe City Council. We've been sitting, we've been talking, we've been negotiating, we've been pushing and pushing to trying to get these items on the Commissioner's Court agenda. So the assumption that we're just sitting and la-la-lying and letting time go by on these projects is ridiculous. We are the lead role on these projects, both of them, both of the projects. What we're waiting for, the main thing that we're waiting for is the permits from the Corps of Engineer as this project crosses a very protected area, the Carter Slough, which is between us and 242. We need to get those permits from the Corps of Engineer before we proceed. We do have the funding promised by these entities. It's just a matter of them getting all of this paperwork and getting text dot approval and getting everybody to nod their heads and put ink to paper to get this going. We see these projects being started before the end of this, before the end of the calendar year, and hopefully before the end of the fiscal year.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Escado, we'll start with you for this next question. If elected, how would you approach the budget and property tax rate for 2022 to 2023?
I would approach the budget the same way I approached it this last year, and the same way that the mayor and the city council approached it years before. The last 4 years, we have come under our projected budget. Last year alone, we came under $1.2 million, under our projected budget. And that's because we picked at every single line item and made sure that we needed this, or if we didn't need it, if we could put it off and put it onto our capital improvements plan, which is a plan, those of you who don't know, it's a plan. It's how we're going to improve the city, how we're going to improve the infrastructure of the city in the next 5 years and the next 10 years. We have $20 million worth of improvements that we need to address within the next 5 and 10 years. So when we look at a budget, we make sure that we need those expenditures for that upcoming fiscal year. And we try as much as we can to trim it. And that's what I want to continue doing, is looking at this budget and focusing on how we're going to spend this money.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, is there a second part?
Pardon?
Is there a second part?
No, that was it. Ms. Lum, would you like me to repeat the question?
Yeah, please.
If elected, how would you approach the budget and property tax rate for 2022 to 2023?
Well, I mean, he just admitted that you've got a $1.2 million surplus. So that tells me we need a little more accuracy. We don't need to collect $1.2 million more than the city is required to have to operate. The approach I'm going to have is, and we've got some people snickering here, and that's fine. If you don't like the approach, come to the budget meeting. They're quite lengthy. But the approach I would have is, you got to consider inflation right now. Again, I don't, we can't say this enough. And so the city's costs are going to be higher. So maybe there's a lot of things we would like, but we can't always afford them. It's like a personal or family, you know, maybe because inflation is so high, you don't go on vacation this year, or you scale back your vacation, or you don't go out to eat as much. That same kind of discipline is needed here in the city. And the other thing I'll say is the sales tax that we rely so heavily on. Should we just assume that this is going to go full speed ahead? We're not going to have any issues with that? I see someone shaking their head. It's something we got to think about, because we don't know what's happening. We've got our southern border that is about to explode. And every town is going to be a border town. There's a lot of things at play here, and to just say, well, you know, everything's so wonderful here, we don't have any problems, you're missing it. We as a nation, we as the city and part of the state of Texas, there are lots of challenges, and it's not negative to recognize it. I think it's healthy. It's healthy when you go to a doctor, you have pain, you know, there's your body's trying to tell you something. And so that's all I'm saying. And it's not a negative approach at all. I view it as healthy. It's a healthy check that we need to have with our budget.
Thank you. Ms. Lum, how will you involve business owners in city government issues?
I'm so glad you asked that question. I talked to so many business owners, especially the hotels on the other side, and I said, would you guys be interested in having a round table and talking about ways that you can help the police? And it's not that we're trying to tell the police what to do. Of course, they're professionals. They know what to do. But these guys actually had some ideas, and I'm not going to get into it here because this is a public forum, and I don't want criminals to pick up on these ideas. But the business owners are very excited about working with the city, and I just think it's healthy anytime you can have new people coming in with some brand new ideas that might actually help fight crime. Why do we want to have the attitude that, oh, this is an SPD issue, let them take care of it? No, I think SPD wants community involvement. They want, they would welcome ideas from business, I would think, and that's what they've told me. So one hotel owner just a few weeks ago said he had 7 cars, the windows smashed. I mean, what is that going to do for tourism? If we've got this reputation where we've got all of this crime or catalytic converter theft going on with cars, they're happening at the same location if you read the police blotter. 9200 Pinecroft, that's a famous place. And I think we need to target these areas, and we need to have a very precision type of approach when dealing with crime. And yes, in the neighborhoods, it's great. I love it. I love the fact that you can go out at night and it's very safe. I appreciate the Shenandoah police more than probably a lot of you might imagine. I really do. And hats off to them. During the year of 2020, when we had all the protests, every time I saw an officer, I would stop and say, you know what, I'm praying for you. I want you to be safe. I'm standing for you. I'm on your side.
Thank you. Mr. Escado, same question. How will you involve business owners in city government issues?
Well, presently, we enjoy great relationships with business owners. I'll give you an example, Sam Moon, the people at Metro Park Square, extremely cooperative with the city. We share mutual interests. We share costs in developing and keeping our drainage, especially their drainage from their private property. We have great relationships with our developers in both of our medical corridors. Great relationships with them. We even consult with them as to how we can develop some of our areas a little better, like this corridor right here between Wellman and Research Forest. So that's an issue that we in the city are trying to address, to change the zoning in there, to allow these developers to come in and improve those zones. So we ask for this input from these developers on ideas. What do you think would go best in this area? What kind of structure you think? What kind of overall establishment would be better here? We have great relationships with our retail sector over in Portofino. We already have established that. Again, we're not sitting on our hands. I mean, this is a constant thing. This is a day-to-day thing that the city has been doing, not on this administration, but in the past. This is not a new thing. We're not inventing the wheel here. It's being done. It's in the process of being done.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Escado, we'll start with you. With so many homes sold to investors for rent houses, what rules will be implemented to make sure the homes and yards are maintained to protect property values?
Well, one of the things that I had in mind is on taking office is I want to establish a form of a volunteer corps. I want to do this on a volunteer basis to solicit volunteerism for those people who can't afford to maintain their homes in the residential areas. Group of people to go around, maybe cut their grass or make improvements to their fences or clean up their backyards, or maybe their houses need a coat of paint, come in and do that job on their behalf because of whatever setback they may have, either health, age, or financial situation. I have addressed this with some of our residents, and I have gotten a lot of interest in doing this, especially from retired professionals that would be interested in doing this, and soliciting the help from young people as well to keep them busy during the summer. So those are some of the things that I would want to address, that I want to address, to make improvements to the overall aesthetic look of our residential area, and as well, and talk to business owners to maintain their properties, especially in those areas that need a lot of maintenance.
Thank you. Ms. Lum,
Can you read the question again?
yes, with so many homes sold to investors for rent houses, what rules would be implemented to make sure that homes and yards are maintained to protect property values?
Well, I think that if you're talking about rental property, I would say that the owner of the property bears the burden of that responsibility. Now, if maybe Mr. Escado's talking about just in general, people that can't afford to maintain their yards and having the volunteer corps. And I don't think that's a bad idea, but I think if someone is a landlord and they've got a lot of their properties, they're renting, they're the ones who screen the renters, so they should have primary responsibility in ensuring that the renters maintain the property. That's to me, just common sense. Now, I do want to go back to something he said about the business owners and a lot of this happy talk. I talk to a lot of business owners who are actually not happy about the sign ordinance. And they're saying, you know, we can't have the hiring signs, we can't have special sale signs. And the city threatened them with like a $20,000 fine. And yet, right up the street at Mia's table, I saw a huge now hiring sign. So I don't really know what is I think we need to get to the bottom of this. Is this inconsistent application of code enforcement? The business owners say, you know, it would help us to have these special signs because you generate more revenue for the city. So I think that there are some issues with the business community, and we need to look at them. And I'm not suggesting that council is sitting on their behind and not doing anything with the business owners. I'm just saying I have some ideas, and I think that business owners welcome the opportunity to get involved with city government. They were all very happy to see me, and it was great for me to be able to meet a lot of them.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we're going to go ahead and move on into closing statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for your closing statements. Ms. Lum, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Okay. Well, first I want to thank everybody for coming and everybody who planned this event. It's really important for us to have this discussion. You have two choices in this mayor's race. One is the status quo, more spending, more taxes, or two, someone who's going to challenge that narrative and ask the hard questions. Mr. Escado is a current sitting council member, and if he wins, he vacates his council seat, and you have 4 members who will determine who takes his seat. It's not we the people. And here's the other thing. We don't even know what the process is for how potential candidates are identified. I have never heard that. And now, on the other hand, if you think that our city needs a mayor who's willing to ask the hard questions, how can we cut spending? How many consultants do we have? Then you should vote for me. Whether we like it or not, I've said this before, our city is very divided. And I'm not going to change it overnight. I will lead by example. And as I said before, we can't go forward if we're constantly looking back and blaming a past administration. I'm not going to do that. I don't think it's helpful for anyone. And this campaign season has been very contentious, especially on Facebook. Now, I don't hold grudges against anyone. So my position is going to be, if I'm elected, that was then and this is now. Everyone will be welcome to come and talk to me, and I will respect all of anyone's opinion. You have the right to speak in council. You have the right to differ in your opinions. I'm not going to disrespect that. And so I would just say, I welcome all of you to come and talk to me about anything. You can ask me about my legal background if that's still a lingering question. And I'll just close by saying thank you for coming. God bless Shenandoah.
Mr. Escado, your closing statement, you have 2 minutes.
I agree with Ms. Lum. I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for participating in this. This is a very important election as far as I'm concerned, as all elections generally are. Anything that affects our city is important to us. I think that we have a momentum. I think that we're moving forward. I think we're moving forward in a positive way. And I want to keep that momentum going. I disagree. I think that we are making the right decisions on behalf of the city. We are looking to take care of the city. None of us here is in it for the money. None of us here is in it for the glory. We are here to work for you, the residents of the city. I want to keep that momentum going. I want to focus on what the city needs and wants and deserves. I just want you to participate. Those of you who are viewing on YouTube, those of you who are present, please take the time to get more involved with the city. The city needs you. The city needs your support. And just go out there, show your support for the city. I want to maintain, again, I want to repeat that I want to maintain the focus on our budget and our expenditures. I want to make sure that the city and the residents have what they need for the future as we move on.
Thank you. We're going to be taking a brief 10-minute break so we can move on to the next race. Candidates, thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, ma'am, what you?
Hi, okay, we're going to get started. Thank you again for everybody being here. I want to thank Shenandoah, the city of Shenandoah, for inviting us as well. My name's Nicole Preston. We're with Community Impact Newspaper, and Andrew Chrisman is here as well, who will be moderating and asking questions. This is for City Council Position 1. We have incumbent Ron Raymaker and Gary Henson. We will have the same rules. We're actually going to give a 2-minute opening and closing statement, and we will ask each candidate the same question and give 2 minutes to respond. Also, we do have note cards in the back for anybody that has questions. We will be taking audience questions. So without further ado, we will go ahead and start with Mr. Henson, a 2-minute opening. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Gary Henson, and I'm running for City Council. My wife Kay and I made our home in Shenandoah over 32 years ago. Our 5 children and now our grandchildren come back home to the place where I plan to live for the rest of my life. I'm a veteran who proudly served in the Army during the Vietnam War. I was a pastor over 25 years and I currently serve on a board for a nonprofit ministry. I know firsthand of the power of service to benefit others. Running for office is not about running for office. It's entirely about benefiting those that you serve. My opponent and I have served on council the same number of years, so it isn't a matter of political experience that differentiates us. This election is about the difference between two men. The reason I am running for City Council is to give Shenandoah a clear choice. Part of that choice I offer is being humble enough to admit that others have good ideas and that collaboration is always the best strategy. I have worked collaboratively with residents, city staff, members, council members, owners, and others to achieve common goals throughout my tenure. The key word in all these efforts is collaboration, and where I differentiate myself is that I do not take credit for all the work that occurred in these groups over my 6 years. I understand strength and humility. Humility motivates a person to be a good listener. In fact, there was a quote by philosopher Ram Dass that said, "The quieter you become, the more you can hear," and I believe that is true. As you participate tonight in this debate, think to yourself, which candidate will truly listen to you and offer you a seat at the table when discussing issues that directly impact your pocketbook and your life? I'll make that promise right now. I will be that person.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. It doesn't seem that long ago, 2016, when I first got elected, that I ran on a slate of cutting expenses. And my handout back then had quite a number of things that were potential cuts. And unlike other folks that just kind of blather on about what they're going to do on a blanket statement, I put everything down individually that I could cut. And we see that now with the $5 million of tax savings that has happened since I've been on council. And so a lot of these dollars were terrible waste. They were for the benefit of city council members, special trips, special meals. You know, we'd have budget meetings and then they'd all crash into a party at Bob's Chop House or someplace like that for $700. We don't do that anymore. So we have restraint on our spending, and so when I hear people that are saying that, you know, we need to cut on something, I would challenge you to come up with the specifics, because I haven't heard too much about what those specifics are from anybody who's running right now. So again, I'm just so pleased to have been your councilman all these years, and would like to keep on continuing to do that. We have a lot of unfinished business to do, so we have things to do with our ETJ and project planning, so those are things that I want to get taken care of. Thanks so much.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with the questions. Again, this is going to be 2 minutes to each candidate, and we're going to be starting with Mr. Henson. What do you think the priorities of the City Council should be?
The priorities of the City Council?
Yes, sir.
Well, the priorities of the City Council should be to make the financial decisions and to evaluate the city budget along with the mayor and to help in that process. The responsibilities also are to communicate and to effectively serve the community by being open, having an open door policy for citizens. I think also the responsibility of the city council is to be a representative of the city and to represent all the people all the time.
Thank you. Mr. Raymaker, what do you think the priorities of the city council should be? You have 2 minutes.
Sure. Our priority should be on planning and budgetary expenses. So we've got growth opportunities that we have to take care of in our ETJ. It's not like a lot of folks think that it's a bunch of, individual property owners who are just residential living along, say, Tamina Road. Those are all owned by corporate entities. And years ago, a lot of folks didn't know who owned that land, but believe me, the corporate guys figured it out. So they know exactly what that land is worth, and that's why we need to unlock that land by planning our ETJ and all the planning that goes into it. We've got a 5 and a 10-year capital expense plan. We've never had one of those before. So we know what we're going to be spending in the short term and in the long term. So I'd like to keep on working on those plans and moving us forward in that direction.
Thank you. Mr. Raymaker, we'll start this next question with you. What, if anything, would you change about the city's budget? Are there areas where spending could be decreased or should be increased? You have 2 minutes.
Well, we've totally changed the way that we do budgeting. When I first got onto council, it was a 3-day barrage of being given facts. There was very little time for questions to be asked. Council members, couldn't get answers from staff fast enough. And so what we do now is we go through these on a meeting-by-meeting basis. We tackle 2 to 3 different areas in the budget. We give the public much more time to take a look at what we're doing and what we're planning on doing. And that's much more transparent than what we used to do. It used to be something where it felt like it was too big to fail. Okay, we've got to set a tax rate. We've got to get this done right now. And so even though folks weren't understanding exactly what they were voting for because they didn't have time to digest it, they still had to do that. So that would be about the only thing that I would, I wouldn't change any of that because we've already made those milestones now where we're taking care of things and planning on a measured pace.
Thank you. Mr. Henson?
Yes.
What, if anything, would you change about the city's budget? Are there areas where spending could be decreased or should be increased?
Yes, I do believe there are areas that can be increased and decreased, especially the decreasing side. The budget has grown over the last 6 years to average about 8.74% per year, and totally that's about a 49.4% growth in expenditures over the last 6 years. So can things be done? Yes, I think the most important thing is to really count the cost before establishing what that budget's going to be. He says we're going great, got plans, got all kinds of plans, but I don't know a citizen that yet knows those plans. So I would challenge that those plans are still maybe in the minds of some of these people, or maybe it's on paper, I don't know. But I do know this, city can always be improved. The city processes can be improved. City establishment, whether it's permitting or whether it's understanding what goes on in the police department, there are many issues that come up during this time.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Henson, we'll start the next question with you.
Okay.
How can the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction best be used?
Would you repeat that question?
Sure. How can the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction best be used?
Well, ETJ is obviously not a part of the city limits. So the extraterritorial jurisdiction is really a multifold area where you don't know what you can do until you actually have access to that property. It has been, for us, it's been an interesting area because the law was just changed last year that said there had to be a vote concerning annexation. So we can't annex that property. So I'm really surprised the city passed that or decided to spend that ARPA money on extending the sewer and water lines down Tamina Road when we don't know what's going to happen with that land, whether we can receive it or not, whether we can actually take it into the city. So I think it kind of got ahead of the plan originally. So I think we have to be very careful with our ETJ, and there are some places that might be willing and wanting to annex us to annex them, but I don't know who they are at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Raymaker, how can the city's extraterritorial jurisdiction best be used?
Okay. Well, I wanted to start with the ARPA funds. And first of all, we're trying to help a disadvantaged community. And so I think that's pretty important to help that disadvantaged community. But along that line, there's misunderstandings about ARPA and how the ARPA funds are used. A candidate was suggesting that we should give the money back. Well, that money would have gone back to Austin, and Austin would have given it to another Texas community. It would not have gone back to help the federal debt at all. As far as the projects that the landowners who are along Tamina right now are mostly corporate entities, and you can look that up. And it's a matter of, like, I go back in time where my buddy Charlie Brott was building a sewer plant, and we didn't have a Portofino, and we did not have a Home Depot. But if you build it, they will come. And they did.
Thank you. Mr. Raymaker, we'll start the next question with you. What types of businesses do you think the city should try to attract to utilize remaining land?
Well, we're not developers, so it's not a matter of that we're going out to try to attract specific developers, but we do have to make the land usable. So if the drainage isn't there, if the amenities aren't there for sewer and water, nobody's going to want to be coming to the city. You couldn't attract them, no matter what you did. So I think that's the most important thing that you have to do is first build the infrastructure up so that people do come, so that, again, if you build it, they will come.
Thank you.
May I rebut?
Sure. Yeah, you can have 1 minute to rebuttal.
Thank you. That's a very interesting statement that he just made, because if the city doesn't own that, or it's not in the city property for them to develop, and he said that it's for a community that needs those services, that's one thing. But if these corporations are the ones that own it, then why aren't they paying for that?
Do I have a rebuttal?
Mr. Raymaker, would you like to rebuttal?
Absolutely. Part of our planning process was to impose impact fees on developers. So it's a matter of those developers are going to be paying a lion's share for that development on that land. And so it's not a matter of that they're not paying anything. I remember last year at this forum, a candidate was saying the same thing. Oh my gosh, the citizens are going to have to pay for it. And that was not true, and it's still not true.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. You're welcome to use your time to speak at will. But we're going to ask Mr. Henson this next question. How can Shenandoah prepare for emergencies such as flooding or other natural disasters?
How can they prepare for flooding? Well, I guess the good news is we have experienced quite a few events that have produced flooding around us, and the city itself has fared fairly well in those times. But you never know what the weather's going to be in Texas, right? It could be flooding tomorrow, and so as I say tonight, we've had good experiences. Something might change tomorrow. We might get flooded out. So I think that happens to come into with city preparation and planning for those kinds of events. Hopefully they've already got those kinds of things in place. If not, then we should make plans for emergencies, and I think we do have those, but in case we don't, we should put it together.
Thank you. Same question, Mr. Raymaker. I'll repeat the question. How can Shenandoah prepare for emergencies such as flooding or other natural disasters?
Sure, we've been accounting for that, again, in our CIP. So a lot of our planning has been around flood control. You see that the Vision Park Pond that is going to be deepened, that's going to be to help the drainage that's all the way over by Enchanted and Savannah. And so those properties over there are going to have much better drainage control over there, and that's going to make that land much more desirable for developers to build on. And likewise, we've done an awful lot on the east side with our retention ponds and some recent acquisitions that we've done that have helped alleviate a lot of potential flooding, that it's moving water out of Shenandoah. And that is something that we've been working on actively and will continue to be working on.
Thank you. We'll offer the opportunity to rebuttal, Mr. Henson, if you have anything to add.
I was just going to say, in reference to the developers paying those fees versus the citizens, I don't think that was in my question, or that was not a part of my answer for sure, is that it's not an issue about who's paying for it at this point. It's an issue, the fact that we have used government funds to pay for that extension into that area, and we don't know whether we're going to actually be able to annex it into the city.
Thank you for that response, Mr. Raymaker. And the last rebuttal, 1 minute, if you have something you would like to add as well.
No, I don't have anything to add to that.
Okay, great. We're going to take just a couple minutes. We'd like to gather the audience questions. We'll be right back. Okay, thank you for your patience. So we have a couple questions for the candidates. We will start with Mr. Raymaker, and we'll give each candidate 2 minutes to answer their questions. If elected to City Council, what efforts would you undertake reducing city expenditures?
Okay. Kind of sounds like a repeat of one of the questions we had earlier, but
Yeah.
we look at every item by department, and we question every single item about what the expenditures are and why they're at a specific level. And so controlling that is just a matter of doing that oversight. And again, because of our improved process, we actually have more time to review and digest and find those savings than you would have had formally under the old process. So that's a pretty important thing to do, that, you know, we do put that oversight in, and we do a lot of homework, believe me. Staff is already working on the budget, and then pretty soon they'll be bringing it to us meeting by meeting as we digest those departments. And so it's really important for us to do that, and I think that we do a fantastic job of reviewing those items. Now, we've cut out a lot of expenses over the years, the car allowances, all the frills that City Council used to get, the 2-course meals that they used to have. We've already eliminated all those things. So yeah, I challenge somebody to find any low-hanging fruit. So, but the other thing that is part of the budget process is what's our revenues. We've just come out of COVID. We've handled the management of uncertainty extremely well. And folks will go, oh my goodness, there's $1.2 million surplus. Well, back in August, we didn't necessarily know what the next variant of COVID was going to be. And we had to plan cautiously and carefully to make sure that we are funded properly. And again, we have $20 million of projects on our CIP. So we're going to have plenty of places to spend money on in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Henson, same question. We may have asked this earlier, but if you have anything additional to add, these are questions from the audience. If elected to City Council, what efforts would you undertake reducing city expenditures?
Well, I believe there needs to be a line-by-line item review of everything and a setting of priorities. Some things are necessary, some things are needed. There's no question or no doubt about that. But I think there's always a lot of waste in everybody's budget. So regardless of what my opponent is saying, there would be a need. I can see easily a 5 to 10% cut on a lot of things that would benefit the city.
Thank you. Mr. Henson, if elected, what is your first 60-day pledge to the residents?
Well, my first 60-day pledge would look something like this. I do believe in town halls, and I would schedule one immediately, kind of in a hybrid format, both with in person as well as a virtual format like on YouTube or Facebook Live, so that we get more people involved. I would begin immediately looking into the process of the budgeting and what my responsibilities and what was taking place in that arena. I would be preparing for that budget process, including the next year's and looking at the 3- and 5-year plans. I would be meeting with staff to hear their priorities for next year's budget. And then I'd start with the city administrator, and including the department heads, the professional services that we employ, and also including the city attorney. Informally, I would also connect with the city staff in the first 60 days, informally, of course.
Thank you. Same question. If elected, what 3 steps would you take to if elected, what would your first 60-day pledge to the residents be, Mr. Raymaker? Sorry about that.
It's going to be to continue to provide the value for the taxpayer. We're going to continue to drive continue to drive down whatever we can in terms of tax rates. We'll always assess what we're doing in terms of revenue that we're bringing in. But you're still going to get the lowest water rates in Montgomery County. We'll still end up with the lowest property tax rate in all of Montgomery County. And those are the things that I'm going to continue to do. And that's always by looking at our budget and our prioritization process that that we've brought in the last couple of years. It's just been awesome. I've just been so happy with my staff that they've been able to do a lot of process improvements for us and been so open and receptive to doing them. I can't say that, other staffs when I first got here did the same, but we got a fantastic staff and we should do what we can to keep them as well.
Thank you, Mr. Raymaker. I got ahead of myself, but here we go. If elected, what 3 steps would you take to increase transparency in the city?
Well, if you didn't know, we've already got 3 of the 4 transparency stars that we qualify for. So I think we're doing a pretty good job on transparency. We had somebody come to one of our meetings and they were complaining about transparency and I said, we just read off 7 bids. People want to work with us and you're seeing what they are. That's transparency. If what transparency means to you is you don't like me, that's another matter. And a lot of people use transparency as if that's what they're talking about. I just don't like you. So, I think we need more transparency. But we've got 1 transparency star left to go. Lisa is very far through the process of getting that approved. And then we will have all the transparency stars that we qualify for. There's a 5th star, but because we have an MDD and not an Economic Development Council, we don't even qualify for that. So we're already doing everything we can for transparency.
Thank you, Mr. Raymaker. Same question, Mr. Henson. If elected, what 3 steps would you take to increase transparency in the city?
Before I answer that, I might just say those transparency stars from the state are pretty common, and if you want to go back and rehash or adjudicate the past, then those council members receive those same awards every year for transparency. So there is some additional needs, though, I think, for transparency. It involves it's really not a single point. It's a continual process of improvement. It can always be optimized. So no matter what level of transparency you have today, there can be more transparency. And I think that gets down to the individual as well as the city staff. So my ideas would be to make everything as simple as possible for the residents and should be always a part of the overall transparency picture. Simplicity should be integrated into our policies and procedures, processes that we ask our residents and businesses to follow. Residents are often confused and frustrated when trying to follow city processes. These could be streamlined. So question about we should investigate, for instance, agenda, i.e. city agenda, the business agenda, not just the agenda items that come out on the people. We need even more transparency on the agenda. For instance, our city minutes for 2022 have not yet been posted, so I don't know how you call that transparent.
Okay, Mr. Henson, for the next question. While
Okay.
campaigning, what are the 3 most common comments by residents that you've heard?
Would you repeat that? I didn't hear that.
While campaigning, what are the 3 most common comments you've heard by residents?
Well, the most common comments that I heard while campaigning have been permitting. I just remodeled my home last year, and I frankly did not have issues with the permitting process. It went pretty smooth. It still took me almost a year to get it done, but thankfully we did, and that process, I don't have any complaints about the process. But a lot of people that I talked to did, and I just think there needs to be perhaps some education for the residents to know what is the process and how can they get through it without having delays and going through that type of thing. The other thing that mentioned to me is traffic. Traffic has always been an issue, been a problem for the city because of its location and its size. So we've got I-45 running right through the middle of Shenandoah, and it's run by obviously by the state. And so we've got issues of traffic that need to be resolved, and I think the way to resolve them is to get some focus groups going with involving the county, the state, and the different entities around this area. The third thing that I've heard a lot about is simply the third thing that was most important to me that I heard a lot about was I'm losing my track of thoughts right now, but trust me, there were more than three.
Thank you. Mr. Raymaker, while campaigning, what are the 3 most common comments you've heard by residents?
Okay. I just want to add, for the transparency side, that the fact that we're actually on video in all of our council meetings that is like the #1 transparency, so you can talk about minutes all you want, you can watch the video anytime. All right. The #1 thing that I hear is, when is Glorious going to open up? That's the #1 thing. The #2 thing is questions about David Memorial Drive. And, I tell them that this is already a funded project. We've got commitment from the city of Conroe that we didn't have before. So that's going to be moving forward. And Charlie Riley is also going to take point on the remaining funds to get it to 242. So we've been waiting on those entities for a while, and so those are going to be coming in. And other things are along the lines of traffic as well. At I-45. Again, we do have 3 projects there, so I'm able to explain to them that these are fully designed projects. We're also just waiting for Commissioner Nowak to move some of these things along as well with his funding as well. But we've got lane improvements that are coming, lane extensions on Research Forest, an acceleration lane onto the feeder road to go south, an extra lane underneath the freeway, and adding a lane right next to Home Depot. So there's a lot of things that are going on there, and those are the things that folks are interested in.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to go ahead and go into closing remarks. Mr. Raymaker, you're up first.
Could I have 1 moment?
This can be in your closing remarks.
All right.
Mr. Raymaker, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, no, I just would like to say that, if you want to stay the course and keep the lowest tax rate in Montgomery County and the lowest water rate that's not subsidized as it used to be by the MDD, then please support me. Don't believe all this stuff that you're hearing about debt that people don't seem to understand. We have $13.7 million of debt that is supported by ad valorem taxes. Everything else is the city does not have any responsibility for. The PID bonds, those are owed by the developer. If he fails, the people that own the bonds will take over. And if they fail, we get the assets, and then we can sell the assets. And similarly with the water loan, it's necessary infrastructure that we need to do, and that is all paid by revenue from the water and sewer funds. So I just want to point those things out. So we have things well managed and well taken care of here. And despite the fact that other people would like to say that, they'd like to give you an Obama phone, or they'd like to give you a tax rebate, and how they can do that irresponsibly when we still have projects coming in the next 5 to 10 years, and we know that we do. We can't ignore the fact that they're there, that, we are planning everything out for you guys, and we love it when you show up and you come and say something, but, we are doing everything that we can to keep you protected and moving things forward in Shenandoah. Thanks so much, guys.
Well, that was interesting. Oh, by the way, my one that I forgot to tell you was they were one of the third part of my answer would be the response from the city. People would think it takes a long time for the city to respond, so I'm just gonna say that's what they told me. So we need to work on that. A response from the city, instead of 3 days, needs to be 1 day, or whatever the situation might be. I would like to thank those who have attended this debate, and thanks to Community Impact for moderating this evening. I also want to thank the city for hosting us this time together. Shenandoah is a great place to live and work, and I appreciate all those who served the city since its incorporation 48 years ago. What tonight is really about is you. Each of the topics discussed affect you in some way. As a fiscal conservative, my priority concerns deal with decreasing spending and reducing debt. And you can say what you want to, those are still important no matter what projects you've got lined out for the future. During the tenure of my opponent, according to the independent audit reports, the city expenditures have increased 8.74% per year. With regard to spending, I stand on the principle that government should abide by the same limitations as the people. This means we need to justify every one of your dollars that we spend. My opponent voted to increase city debt by $6.5 million just last month. Was there no other way to fund water and sewer projects, which over the life of the loan actually cost the city almost $12 million? I would hope so. Including data from the independent audit reports, the city debt has increased 49.4% over the last 6 years. I will do as a fiscal conservative in this race, I will do everything I can do to avoid placing the city into more debt. At the end of the day, we need to ask ourselves, especially in the current economic climate, how can the city be beneficial and provide benefits to the residents and businesses? If these are your concerns, please vote for me, Gary Henson.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Community Impact Newspaper, I'd like to thank our Shenandoah City Council Position 1 candidates, Mr. Ron Raymaker and Mr. Gary Henson, for attending and being here. As a quick reminder, early voting starts April 25th. Election Day is May 7th. We appreciate everyone's time. It's very important. We encourage everybody to get out and vote, and thank you for being a reader.